Hello, and thank you for choosing to watch this video. This is number 17 in the series that features my original artwork, which imagines what-if model kits of film, TV, and science fiction subjects. Model kits that I would have snapped up or saved up my pocket money to buy these. Back then, there was a treasured handful of TV and film-related kits. Many years later, I found out that there were a number of kits from Japan of several Anderson vehicles and aircraft, but these were not terribly authentic. UFO was a science fiction series made in 1970, set in 1980, and followed Shadow, a state-of-the-art secret organization that was set up to thwart an ongoing alien invasion. Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization. Gerry Anderson had made a name for himself in the 1960s with his Super Marionation shows, but this was live action. And the premise of the show is that aliens have been coming to Earth for years and abducting people to harvest body parts for their dying civilization. Yuck. Episodes would typically follow an invading UFO or UFO and Shadow's attempts to destroy it, or better still, capture it and an alien and learn vital details about them and their technology. There was a ton of cool hardware in the show, in space, under the sea, in the air, and on land. All of this executed to the highest possible standard and a great subject for model makers. Any kits would need to be very well detailed and include lots of markings and stencils. These things are covered in stencils. Starting in space, Space Intruder Detector, or SID, was an orbiting robotic tracking station responsible for long-range scanning and alerting Shadow to any incoming UFO. I just want to say, I love SID. It's an odd-looking thing, but memorable and credible. The satellite's approximately 70 feet long, so in 1/72nd scale, it'd be about a foot in length. This would come in white plastic. Shadow had a moon base. This was their front line of defense. The staff was an all-female crew with purple hair, wigs that were part of the uniforms. And this is probably what most people remember of the show. It's iconic. Moonbase would launch interceptors, 3 single-seat spaceships that carried a formidable long-range missile on the nose. These looked really cool and would take off from underground silos and fly to coordinates specified by Moonbase, and then they'd fire the missiles. These would usually miss the target and the interceptors would return to base. Obviously, if they were successful, it would be a very short story. Seems like the interceptors would be a really cool kit in 1/72nd scale. They kind of feel like a fighter plane, and a 1/72nd scale kit would be 10 inches or so in length. It'd be nice size. Probably about the same size as the Dinky toy, and a bit about that later on. The UFOs themselves are a work of incredible imagination. They are not the silver disc or hubcap we've come to expect from TV and films and real-life sightings and descriptions. These are shiny glass domes with a gleaming metal ring of petals that rotate at very high speed. They were accompanied on screen by a sound effect, courtesy of musical genius Barry Gray, an electronic sound. He was kind of a pioneer in that. And often they would just play that sound and you wouldn't see anything on the screen. You'd be looking at the sky or looking at deep space and you wouldn't see anything, but you'd hear it. It was super eerie, super cool. So a kit of this thing would be a bit tricky. In 1/72nd scale, it would be about 3.5 inches, 4 inches in diameter. So not huge, but it would be fun to think that it could include one of those flick start motors that you got with the 24 scale super kits. You'd have a flick start motor and you could kind of just flick the ring of petals and it would go spinning around and around, which would just be really, really cool. Obviously it would come, largely in clear plastic, which can always be a bit of a challenge, and then, silver or grey plastic. Another piece of regular hardware was the Shadow lunar module. This was basically used to ferry personnel and equipment to and from Moonbase. It was lifted to a very high altitude whilst docked to this lunar carrier aircraft, and at the appropriate height it would undock and fly to Moonbase, and returning it would be vice versa. I've always really liked this design. I love this thing. It gets a bit of a rough time amongst fans who say it looks like a guppy fish. And there's definitely angles where it doesn't look great, but there's angles where it looks fantastic. I just really, really like the lunar module. The lunar carrier seems to have been inspired by the flying flapjack or the flying pancake, some experimental US aircraft of the 1960s. This artwork was inspired by a piece of pre-production artwork by Derek Meddings of the lunar module and the carrier docking. Obviously, it was early in production, the design wasn't finalised, but I've always really liked that picture, and I thought this would be a nice way to show it on the box. As a 72nd scale kit, it would be about 10 inches long. With the lunar carrier, it would be about 15 inches long. It would be a nice kit for two things. Skydiver is Shadow's submarine with the jet aircraft attached to the nose, Sky 1. It was always exciting when UFOs were coming in and you'd see the guys in the control room and they'd say, all right, get me Skydiver. You always knew like things were going to happen. It was always exciting. Skydiver itself never did much because it was a submarine and it cruised under the water, but Sky 1 was this, super high performance jet aircraft that was attached to the nose. And when they launched it, they'd tilt Skydiver up at a good angle and then basically Sky 1 would sort of fire off the front, break the surface and go off to intercept or attack a UFO. This is just pure Gerry Anderson. The guy jumps into a chute, he slides into the cabin, there's cool Barry Gray music, the thing blasts off, it all looks great. It's just, yeah, this is, if anyone says, hey, what's Gerry Anderson? There you go. This is a trivial thing, but I just love it. If you look at the side of it, it's a Skydiver on the side, and the sky part is on Sky 1, and the diver part is on the bit that stays underwater. So it's a trivial thing that, just shows the kind of coolness of the people making the show, that they thought to do that. As Sky 1 is an aircraft, it's logical that the kit would be 1/72nd scale, so you could see it with other things. A scale FX also used for some of their boats, the MTB and the E-boat, and I think the rescue launch. The whole kit, Skydiver and Sky 1, would measure about 19 inches long, so it'd be big, it'd be a big kit. There's a lot of detail on it. There would be a lot of opportunities for modelling, for model making. Some sort of green plastic would be ideal. That's a question for everyone. What colour is Skydiver? It looks kind of gold, it looks kind of green, it looks kind of brown. I don't know what colour it actually is. Again, this would be a big and probably a pretty expensive kit, and I think because Sky 1 is what really does all the heavy lifting, a separate kit of Sky 1 would be available, but basically this would be exactly the same kit as you got in the Skydiver ensemble, if you like. And then, how about a Dogfight Double with Sky 1 and a UFO? I just love the Dogfight Double idea. I love the name Dogfight Double. The idea that you'd kind of get two things that were pitted against each other. And originally, when they were out, you would get a stand that would allow you to pose the two things however you wanted. Firing at each other, chasing each other, what have you. In this painting, I wanted to sort of show some action. You never really saw the things this close together. But when the UFOs were hit, they were kind of really interesting because they would sort of spew this kind of pink, orange, red smoke. And in the stories, they sort of said that the UFOs could only survive in the Earth's atmosphere for a limited amount of time, after which the shell started to sort of decay. So I thought that was a really nice, and I think even they kind of get tarnished as one where it's sort of been in a forest for a few days, and you see it kind of getting yellows and stuff because it's sort of deteriorating. It's just a really cool idea that it's made out of some material that we're not familiar with. And again, the sort of red smoke when it gets hit rather than white or black smoke that we would expect from an Earth-made plane. It's just really interesting. So I wanted to kind of represent that in this piece of artwork. Again, sort of in a regular plot, sort of following it through, Sky 1 would sometimes be successful, sometimes not. Often it miss the UFO, or the UFO would sort of crash land somewhere. And they usually landed in remote places, which I guess is consistent with the real-life stories from people when they see a UFO. But anyway, certainly in the TV show, it would usually crash either in the water or in a forest or wood. And this was a cue for the arrival of the mobiles. Now, the mobiles, they're just awesome. Mobiles are awesome. They're sort of armoured car, tank-like vehicles. They were armed sort of with big cannons. I think they had slightly different hardware depending on the episode. But they'd also sort of carry some personnel. So to kind of get to the area, and then people would sort of get out on foot. So there'd be guys with machine guns and the mobiles kind of driving around. 3 mobiles, numbered 1, 2, 3, and Shadow Control coordinated the team. Again, they were just super cool. They looked great. They were designed by Mike Trim, always conveyed by a miniature effect. They were about 18 inches, 2 feet long. Not massive models, but man, they looked absolutely terrific. Just stunning, really, amazing stuff. So to be a decent sized kit, again, 1/32 is Airfix's scale of choice. So just to be consistent with that world and that history, and 1/32, I think it'd be about 9.5 inches long, maybe 10 inches long. A detailed cab and some drivers, and again the options for the hardware that fire out of the top of it, the roof area. Silver plastic, which I love, and you'd get transfers for mobiles 1, 2, and 3. And then I mentioned Shadow Control, which was basically a fourth mobile that had this big scanner thing on the top. And yeah, this would be the same kit as the mobile, but with some extra parts for the scanner and the requisite decals. Really cool. And although seen only briefly in the series, there was a Shadow mobile transporter, or Shadair mobile transporter, which was a massive aircraft, 190, 200 feet long, 200-foot wingspan, really, really big. Round about this time, there were some giant aircraft. The US had the Galaxy, Russia had the Antonov AN-205, massive sort of jet engine transporters for carrying, military equipment and vehicles around. And they were sort of coming into service around about this time. So I'm sure Derek Meddings and Mike Trim looked at those things. For this artwork, I looked at the Airfix kit box of the Hercules, the C-130, which was one of the largest transporters probably up to that point. And the Airfix kit was really great. It came with, this Bloodhound missile and trailer and a little crew that went with it, including a man and his dog. And the box art was just sensational. It just, you saw this incredible sight of this rocket being loaded into the back of the plane, and it's a good looking plane. And so I really wanted to sort of use that as inspiration and sort of pay due respect to that, as it's sort of a similar idea, but Gerry Anderson, a Gerry Anderson version. So I did this painting that's sort of based on the episode of The Computer Affair, where the mobiles are intercepting a UFO that's in Canada and it lands at this Canadian airfield. So I kind of did that, imagine that scene in a little more detail than there's time to show in the episode. So I got some ground crew standing around, some guards. You can see the mobiles being deployed out of the rear. Really cool stuff. Not quite Thunderbird 2, but cool stuff. It's interesting that Shadow, is a secret organization, yet their aircraft have this big logo on the side. It says Shadair and has the Shadow logo on it. I guess it's not overtly saying, hey folks, UFOs are real and we're fighting them. But you think they come up with something a little more innocuous, as they do, I think, with the ground transporters. So yeah, this aircraft as a kit, it's about close to 200 feet long, as far as I can tell. So that'll be about 16 inches with a similar wingspan, 17 inches. Big chunky kit, and I think you'd have to get it with, the hatch would have to open at the back, like the Hercules kit ramp opened, and you'd get the 3 mobiles and mobile control, which would be about 2 inches long, not very big, but yeah, it would just be a fun kit. If you could afford it, I'm sure it would not be cheap given how big it would be, but you'd want it in 1:4 scale, so it'd be in scale with other sort of big aircraft. And in my imaginary world, it would be in the same scale as Thunderbird 2. This would be come in white or grey plastic, probably. The miniature that appears in the show is a reworking of a model that was built for the feature film Doppelganger. In that film, there's a NASA vertical takeoff and landing plane that brings Glenn Ross to Eurosec. It appears only briefly, it's in a handful of shots, but Derek Medding's doing what he does best. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's pretty implausible as it lands and part of the fuselage detaches and it's taken to the airport gate or whatever. But it's Gerry Anderson. So this is pure imagination and nerd overload coming up, but if there was a kit of the mobile transporter, it's feasible that it could have been engineered in such a way that there could have also been a kit of the NASA VTOL plane. Looking at the two, there are some differences. It's not just the same model. It's got more engines. The nose is kind of a different shape. The cabin's a different shape. And the whole thing is a different size. I mean, I think if you said the Doppelganger kit was 1/72 scale, I think that would work out pretty well. I don't know. It's a leap, but it's a bit of fun. It's equally as much fun to imagine this Shadair mobile transporter kit kind of getting customized by people in the what if parallel world and customizing it, scratch building stuff to make the Doppelganger plane. Whatever happened to scratch building, by the way? Anyway, for this box, I didn't want to just show it in the scene where you see it in action in the film where it's coming into land, partly because I felt like that could be confused with the UFO box top. So I did it like flying in prior to that scene, so it's coming in over the Eurosec base. You can see the rocket assembly building. I don't know what the Eurosec base looks like, but I just thought this would be a bit more eye-catching. Again, for nerds only. And then, last, but by no means least, is Ed Straker's car. Now, Ed Straker was the head of Shadow, just a really cool guy, so he had a really cool futuristic car. And they built this thing as a full-size working prop. Derek Meddings designed it. It's super beautiful. I mean, it's just a really nice looking car. They kind of gave it this kind of jet engine sound effect when it was driving around. And it has these, massive gull wing doors. It had a phone in it, which I was like, wowee, this is the future. And it came in this beautiful chocolatey brown, cocoa brown colour that was all the rage in the early 70s. It's just a great looking car, a rarity for an Anderson show, that obviously it's a full-size prop. They did build a miniature for some scenes. The car was taken to various displays over in the 70s. I think it still exists. I think I've seen some pictures in the last few years of it in somebody's garage sort of being restored. If I find a link, I'll put it in the description. I will say before anyone writes in that yes, there is a piece of trivia that the gull wing doors only opened via movie magic. But still, it is TV, it's sci-fi. So as much as it would have been great if there'd been kits of all these things, UFO was well represented in toys at the time. Dinky Toys, who made little metal model cars, they did Straker's car, which had this sort of pullback action. I think you sort of pressed down on it, pulled it back, let it go, and it raced along the ground. But anyway, it was gold for some reason. Dinky never did these things the right colour. But it was cool, it was Straker's car. They also did the Interceptor, which came in a bright sort of metallic lime green colour. Who knows why? Incidentally, the Eagle Transporter that Dinky also did came in that same metallic green. But anyway, the Interceptor was cool. It fired a missile, and you could put a little paper cap, and then when you hit the trigger on the side and it launched the missile, it would go bang, or a fizzly cap sound. But the best one I did, which is probably one of the best diecast toys I remember, was the Mobile. They did the Mobile. Again, it wasn't the right color. It looked okay, it wasn't metallic. It was a sober color, and Mobiles are like tanks, so that was kind of cool. And the tracks worked, which was a rarity for any sort of toys or anything in those days, which had real Caterpillar tracks. And the top of it sort of flipped open, and there was a posable launch thing for a missile, and it had this little tiny missile that would fire off somewhere and get lost promptly. But if you were really into your Anderson stuff, you had other Dinky Toys, you could use the missiles from either the SPV or Fab 1. So yeah, the drive for UFO kits wasn't there quite as much as, with Thunderbirds, because you actually got some of this stuff. In this video, I don't want to say there weren't any kits. It's just when I was growing up, I wish there had been kits of these that I could kind of go out and buy and build. In the early 2000s, there was a company called Product Enterprise that did a lot of really high-quality die-cast models. There were or are some garage kits, really, really high-quality studio-scale models. And I think there is something very meta, to use that new phrase, about having model kits of things that were originally models. There's something just really cool about that. And I think given all the scenarios, there'd be some really funky modeling opportunities. Anyone who likes weathering and washes and just, making super detailed models, this is for you. So anyway, that brings us pretty much to the end of this one. This just in. Round 2, who made the excellent 22-inch Eagle, are making a 1/32nd scale Mobile. And at Wonderfest 2025 last week, the Round 2 booth apparently had a work-in-progress 3D print of the Mobile. The release date is sort of early 2026-ish, no actual date as such or price, and apparently they're looking for licensing to be confirmed. I don't really know what any of that means, but I just thought I would include this bit of information in the spirit of completeness. I think they're also doing an Interceptor, although there didn't seem to be as much information or evidence of that. So we'll see what happens. Keep 'em peeled, as Shaw Taylor would say. So that is it. That does wrap it up for this video. Please feel free to add any comments, ask any questions. Please like and subscribe. Check out the website as artwork for sale, and commissions are always welcome. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.